Hey everyone, Brian here with XBloom. Today I wanted to do a tasting of a limited release coffee that we released a few weeks back, about a month ago, and it's been tasting amazing. I'll give you guys a little spoiler there. And this is a coffee called Kianyangi AA. It is a wash canyon from my friend Bill, who runs Hydrangea Coffee Roasters out of Berkeley, California. I wanted to post this video because I think tasting limited release coffees is super fun for you guys who pick up the coffees, especially because we all can experience the same exact cup because we are brewing it on studio. Check out the website for new updates on limited release coffees, and of course sign up for the emails. We send an email out on all of our new releases. But this is a release that I actually am very, very happy with. This is a Wash Canyon coffee, and it's just super expressive and it's tasting awesome. So I wanted to brew it and give you guys a little bit of a walkthrough of brewing coffee on studio and tasting coffee as well. This is something we do for the Secret Stash subscriptions. If you guys like this type of video and you want a slightly more faster paced curation of coffees, that's what Secret Stash is for. But I wanted to just go ahead and taste this coffee and see what you guys thought about this video. So here we go. So I have studio here, it's ready, make sure there's water in it, and this is a awesome coffee. So, let's open it up. This coffee, by the way, is actually really light. So I have actually found it to open up even in this 5 to 8 week period, which is kind of surprising for a lot of people. I mean, you know, we have one dot on the card here, which just says it's a light roast coffee, but there are degrees of lightness here. And this is a coffee that I have found to just keep giving and giving and giving as the coffee ages. And I think we have a few more left if you wanted to pick it up and try out the coffee yourself. But here we go, we're gonna pour the coffee in. As with all of our limited releases, I like to do this. I actually just use the card, but feel free to adjust. We can talk a little bit about adjusting the recipe and some adjustments that you may want depending on what flavor profile you're looking for after we do the recipe on the recipe card. So here we go, scan it up here. And I'm just gonna hit go. So this is a recipe Bill made, 1:15 ratio, grind size 70 on studio. So on the coarser side and also on the lower ratio, but that smells nice. This is a really great representation of, I think, why you may be interested in tasting Kenyan coffee. So a lot of Kenyan coffees, like this one specifically, has notes of black currant, black tea, and plum. This is definitely a coffee that veers more towards red fruit in the context of Kenyan coffee. This is also a wash process coffee, so you are going to have nice notes that you'll be able to smell, especially after grinding there. That's what I was doing, is whenever I'm brewing, I actually really like to smell the coffee as it's being ground and as the first few pours of the machine when we're brewing the coffee, smell what that is. It smells very red fruity, it smells super clean, and it's just a nice experience. Like, this is a coffee that I think is a great representation. It totally can be used as a daily driver, but you get a lot of really nice expressive qualities of Kenyan coffees. Now what we can do is, obviously while it's brewing, we can watch the magic happen, or we can walk away and come back to a really nicely brewed cup of coffee. But we're gonna taste this, and I'll tell you guys a little bit more about adjustments you can do to this recipe and how that might impact the cup for you. Because this is a 1:15 ratio, I think this will be very interesting for a lot of people. If you have paid attention to a lot of our recipes from our roasters and from me, if you're on Secret Stash, you'll find that with a lot of light roast coffees, we tend to prefer large ratios, like 1:16, 1:17, 1:18. This is a 1:15 ratio, and I actually haven't really had many coffees with this type of roast profile at this, I would deem, lower ratio. And I think this is what's going to be very fun for us to taste and for you to experience. Once the weight stabilizes, you'll hear that beep, and brew time on this coffee is going to be around that 3-ish minute mark. But here we go. That smells really nice. Now, if you look at the color here, look at how dark and intense the color is. And intensity is the proper way to describe what this coffee tastes like. It is loud, especially at this ratio. Here we go. So I'm gonna taste it when it's hot with all of our limited releases and most of the lighter coffees, I find that it is beneficial to you to taste the coffee when it is hot and then experience it as it starts to cool. Coffees really start to open up as the temperatures drop, and you'll get a lot more of those expressive qualities. But with this coffee at 1 to 15, it's hot. I just poured the coffee in. Let's give it a taste. Smells great, smells clean, smells very red fruity. That is fun. It is very, very intense. A lot of this red fruit is kind of compacted, and that is what you are experiencing. There's always a level of loudness or expressiveness or even textural heaviness with a lot of these Kenyan coffees. That is what I am 100% experiencing here, and it's even amplified at this 1 to 15 ratio. As the coffee cools down, this is when we're going to get a lot more of these notes, like the blackcurrant note, the tea, the plum. That's going to come out a lot more. Now that it is cool, let's taste it. Wow. Now we're getting a lot more detail in terms of what the exact acidity is. And it's red fruit. It is a loud red fruit. I 100% can see somebody experiencing this as maybe a plum. If you've ever eaten a very ripe plum or kind of the skin, there's like a little bit of that acidity there. That is what I am experiencing here, and it is very red fruit leaning. So that's the really nice thing, is that because we're using the same exact coffee, we're using the same recipe, we all can experience something quite similar. Of course, changes in water will impact a lot of things, but we're all able to experience things that are like relatively similar. And I think this is what's really fun about this. I'm gonna give this a little bit more of a taste. Red fruit, big body, very intense. There's a lot of juice in this as well now that it's cooled down. And the finish is very clean. Like, it's clean. I mean, there's a linger on my palate here, but I'm not tasting any sort of roughness or any sort of weirdness going on. It's just a nice, big, loud red fruit, and then it finishes clean. I'd say there's like a rounding at the end that's also nice and sweet, but the most interesting thing with this is actually this recipe, and I think it's this ratio that is greatly pushing up this perception of intensity, this perception of acidity, and it's tasting great. Now that we have tasted this with this recipe, let's talk a little bit about recipe adjustments and where you can push this coffee and what I have experienced. First of all, of course, get the app. I think the app is what will allow you to unleash the capabilities of the studio. As you see there, my machine paired up to Bluetooth. You can just scan the card here. So point this here at this, where it says here, where you scan the machine, and you'll see the recipe here. So the recipe on the card is here, 15 grams, 70 grind size, 120 RPM, 1 to 15 ratio. I think what will be interesting for you all to experience with this is to push the coffee out, kind of stretch it out a little, and play with those larger ratios, like 1 to 16, 1 to 17, and at a finer grind. So I'm going to build a recipe, and we will go and talk a little bit about that. Now let's talk a little bit about recipe adjustments. So I've decided to make a new recipe here, and we'll go ahead and brew it, and we'll taste it against the first recipe that we did here, which is the recipe done by Hydrangea. I think this is what makes this so much fun, is to just, taste all the different recipes side by side, but I'll walk you guys through the recipe that I ended up with. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, it was about usually how you would brew these coffees in the large ratios. I think that is what we're going to do here, because it will offer a very contrasting experience to this. So here is the recipe. I have opted for a 1 to 70 ratio, grind size 60, and I've kept the grind RPM at 120. And then I have made the first pour, 45 mils at 3 mils a second, 9 degrees Celsius, so I haven't really changed the temperature much, and I've now added a longer bloom here. And I have a bunch of different pours, but I'll just link the recipe in the description so you guys can import it, and feel free to use this recipe for other coffees. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to kind of stretch the coffee out a little bit more, maybe move the acidity into the middle of the cup, and we will see what that tastes like. And I have called it Kianyangi AA version 2. So this is just a different style of the recipe, and of course, you feel free to make adjustments to my recipe and go from there. Let's go ahead and brew up a second version of this recipe. Just gonna hit play. I've really liked how this coffee smells when it's brewed. Stock recipe, the recipe made by Hydrangea is a really great recipe. We're just presenting a different style, and that's the kind of thing with coffee brewing, is that the way you brew coffee, there really isn't a right way to do things. I would really say that nowadays, with a lot of the recipe adjustments, even recipes created by roasters, it's really a presentation of dynamics, right? It's like, what are we trying to go for? There are various ways to accomplish end goals of creating a great cup of coffee. And for me, for a coffee like this, I kind of want to stretch things out a little bit more and try to see where I can push the acidity. Like, can I make the acidity a little, instead of it being just this like huge intensity of acidity, can I make it maybe have a little more extension or a little bit, transition to different things? But for sure on this recipe, because we're going 1:17 ratio, we are going to be getting a lot more liquid in the cup. And once this is done, we'll taste it real quick against the original recipe. And I think that's what makes this whole experience very fun. And what we're trying to tap more into is put out videos like this of just, let's play around, have some fun with the coffees and have you guys taste them. The thing that I always aim for when I am brewing lighter roast coffees on studio is with both the X-Pods and the Omni Dripper, is I'm aiming for some sort of constant flow outside of the dripper. So see there, I have the pour, and I just am constantly hearing coffee get into the cup. I also can visually see that as well on the app as I look at the brown line here, which is a value of weight. We're seeing the weight value constantly go up at a very steady pace, which means that our flow is very good. It's really gonna help us pull a lot of those nice expressive qualities like acidity out of a wash coffee like this one. Now I'm gonna wrap up. Brew time is gonna be a little bit longer, so we're for sure pushing the coffee a bit harder here. And that's the thing with coffees like this, is originally I started to say, hey, look, this coffee is 3 to 4-ish weeks off roast. It still tastes like there is more to give as it ages out. And I think that's really because of, one, the roasting style of this coffee, but also it's the coffee itself. There's just so much more to give. And you can get a lot of this stuff out of the coffee into the cup as you brew the coffees harder. And that can either be done with things like total brew time, grind sizes, temperature. There are a lot of variables, but this for sure will give you a very different presentation than the first cup. So let's go ahead and taste this now. As always with these coffees, taste them when they're hot, and as they cool, see how the cup changes. I think with these coffee tastings, things get chaotic, but it's fun. But here is the second version of this recipe that I just made for here, and let's see how it tastes different. Okay, when it's hot, very, very different. Originally, there was this intensity of, I would say, sweetness. We were able to get a lot of just red fruit berry note up front. This here, after pushing the coffee out, stretching the coffee out, definitely very sweet up front. It's kind of like sweetness into acidity, into cleanliness, versus acidity forward, then into sweetness and cleanliness. So the orders have kind of been shifted around, and that's really because of the ratio and, well, how we are brewing the coffee. Grind size also, and the flow rate. So I've just listed a million variables. But the point is that the coffee tastes different, and that's what's really fun about brewing the same coffee and changing the recipes. Now that this is cooled, less intense of a acidity presentation for sure because of the ratio difference, but more so into this balanced presentation. There is really nice acidity in here still, but it is, I would say, more perceivable. Like for me, I definitely am getting more tea attributes in this recipe than the first recipe. Whereas the first recipe, I would say, the one that comes on the card, is more black currant, red fruity tasting. This is more of a tea-like profile with acidity in it, of course. So different expressions of the same coffee, and that's the fun thing with pour-overs, and that's the fun thing with having all these recipes on here, is that we're able to just take a coffee, brew it back to back, and get good cups, but very different dynamics and different presentations. So Yeah, this coffee is tasting great on both of these recipes. That is all I wanted to go over today. This is Kianyangi AA by Hydrangea Coffee Roasters. If you have any questions, let us know. But otherwise, thank you so much for everybody who has picked up this coffee. And I think we might have a few left. So if it's still available, like our limited release coffees kind of go quick these days, feel free to pick it up. This is a coffee that I've really been enjoying, even 6 to 8 weeks off roast, tasting great. And thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, let us know, and see you guys in the next one.